Tonight I'm going to tell you 2 or 3 stories about saints that lived up here in the Sperrins Mountains. I'm not going to tell you the story of St. Patrick. It's a very well-known story. But Christianity has had a huge influence on our culture ever since St. Patrick laid feet in these shores. Before that, Ireland was a country of tribes, of petty kings, chieftains. They followed the old gods, the Tuatha, the Fomorian gods, the newer Celtic gods. And it's always very hard for me to fathom how Christianity managed to get in when nothing else could. But St. Patrick wasn't the first missionary to come here. Apparently there were others. But St. Patrick set that trend of being a Christian, a holy man, but a warrior. And that's just what Christianity needed to get through to the Irish. They needed warriors to talk to warriors. They needed strong men to take on strong men. But even after Christianity did take that early hold in Ireland and began to build its churches, in some areas in the Sperrins, over at Ennimaha, over in Armagh, and even down as far as Tara, Christians weren't allowed to build their churches near it. And even to this day, that stands true. So in the early days of Christianity, right through for 1,000 years, they still respected the old ways. Maybe not so much the old gods, but definitely the old ways of the ancient Irish people. But enough of that, we'll start the story, so we'll jump straight on here. Now, it's often said that St. Patrick rid all the snakes out of Ireland. But after his death, there is an account of one or two. The Owen Ray River rises in the slopes of the Sperrins. It's in the parish of Banagher, and on its journey to the sea, it has cut a deep wooded glen. And the only sound that you'll hear over the summer are the cows in the field and the buzzards in the air. However, it wasn't always as peaceful. In that part of the Sperrins, from Banagher to Feeney, Claudy, the people were terrorised by this beast. The serpent led waste to the land from the slopes of the Sperrins to the shores of Lough Foyle and became known as Lug na Pesta. In despair, the local people of the mountain turned to the holy man Murragh O'Heaney, and this man had a church in the glen, which is known today as Banagher Old Church. Hearing of this beast, St. Murragh fasted for 10 days and 10 nights, praying to God for the power to defeat the serpent. And God gave him the knowledge of how to capture the beast. Strengthened by God's power, the saint went to the lair of the beast, which is a very deep pool in the river. He took with him 3 rods made from river reeds. The beast, seeing the man, approached him. He was intrigued. This man was coming at him with no swords, spears. He was coming with a handful of reeds. He thought the saint was to be a sacrifice sent by the locals to appease him. St. Murragh called out to the serpent to allow him in God's name to place the reeds upon him. The serpent, rightfully amused at all this, thought it was part of a sacrificial rite. So he allowed St. Murragh to approach him and lay the rods on him. But immediately, when the reeds touched the serpent, St. Murragh made the sign of the cross and called upon God to change the rods into iron. This God did, and the serpent was clamped in his iron cage. Although the great serpent begged the saint for mercy, the saint refused. He declared the serpent sinned against God's people, and that he'd be bound forever in his cage and cast into the depths of Lough Foyle. The serpent asked for one last favour. He asked that he was allowed to look upon the land one last time, from where the river leaves Banagher all the way to Lough Foyle. But some say he was just mapping the river for whenever he gets free, he'd be able to swim back up. Now, the people of Banagher can count themselves very lucky they built that dam, but the people below it might not be that lucky if that serpent ever gets free again. And to this very day, the strange currents that flow in and out of Lough Foyle are said to be that caused by the beast trying to break free of his iron cage. But if you ever are in the Sperrins Mountains, the old church and the monuments around Banagher should very much be on your to-do list. There's another saint, St. Ambrose of Coffey, again from the Sperrins Mountains, and he had the name of the Demon Hunter. He was said to be a powerful preacher, but also very powerful in the old magic of Ireland. He died in McGilligan, and is said to have left behind him a Druid's library. Texts, which is said to be made from tree bark, human skin, and held some of the most powerful spells known to man, and it is said to also have contained the first directions on how to carry out an exorcism. Now, these texts were said to be kept in a monastery near Duncrun, near McGilligan, right up until it was destroyed in the 12th century. And the local guardians of that ancient knowledge quickly leapt into action and took the books and hid them again. After this, the next account of these books is connected to St. Columba, and that they were hidden in the chest of St. Columba, which could only be approached and opened by a man who had never been born, riding a horse that had never been born. To you and I now, a C-section is normal practice, normal medicine, but back then, things were a little bit different. Then came along Bishop Frederick. He was born by C-section, and he knew where to find a horse that had the same type of birth as him. And when the chest appeared again, it was in the construction of the Museum Temple on the north coast. But at this stage, the ancient guardians had all gone, and the bishop had the text to himself. But such was the knowledge contained in them that the bishop quickly had them removed, and some say to Derry, he feared that if these texts got in the wrong hands, it could spell death and destruction on a scale never known before in Ireland. After this, there's no more mention of the text. They've never come up again in any stories or even in any fairy tales. But we know to this day there are dark forces at work, and they scour the entire country trying to find these texts. And especially at this time of year, coming up to Selwyn. And you and I best pray that the yearly festival up in Derry City for Halloween doesn't shake loose these texts. But this festival could very quickly turn into a sacrifice. I think a very honourable mention in all this would be St. Columba. Now, exiled out of Ireland for going to war with the High King of Ireland at the time and defeating him, he made his final resting place on the island of Iona in Scotland. But he never refused anybody's call for help. He even returned home once. Apparently he tied sods of grass from Scotland under his sandals as he swore not to set foot on Irish soil again. It's also said that he encountered the Loch Ness Monster, and he went to help the local people. And when he got to the loch, he instructed one of his followers to get in and swim. And at this stage, he was sort of waiting, like the story of Mara, that the saint would go into battle. But St. Columba simply put his hand up, rose his staff, and said, "You will not attack this man or people ever again." But the Loch Ness Monster could be a serpent that was banished out of Ireland, and having already been beaten by one Irishman, when he stuck his head up and seen St. Columba, a very imposing Irishman at that, maybe he just thought the better and goes, you know what, I'm going back to sleep. And since then, there's been no recordings of the Loch Ness Monster ever attacking people. That's not a good one. The Loch Ness Monster's Irish too. So we're going to finish off with a giant. And throughout all the wee talks that I've been doing, I'll have referenced the giants of Ulster. And the story's been told now for over 2,000 years, all talk about the giants in this area. But Ulster truly is the land of giants. But back when St. Patrick was trying to establish his chapel in Armagh, he was terrorised by a great black bull. Every time he laid the foundation down, the big bull would come in and knock it all over again. Frustrated by this, St. Patrick was going to give up. Until the local people told him about a man of courage who lived in Sleegallen, and he went by the name of Tadhg and was one of the long line of Sleegallen giants. So when word got to Tadhg, he finally made his way over to Armagh. And when he arrived in Armagh and met with St. Patrick, despite being a formidable man, St. Patrick blessed him with more strength. He wanted to make sure that this would be the last battle with the bull. Tadhg was then left to protect the site, sit watch after the workmen had left for the day. And he was rose out of his slumber by the sound of the great black bull. But fearless, he jumped into action. He ripped an ash tree out by its roots, grabbed the bull by its tail, and beat the bull all the way over to Sleegallen, over the Blackwater River, over the River Bann, through the lowlands of Cookstown, and into Sleegallen. Tadhg beat the black bull all the way to Tullybrick, a very marshy, peaty part of the mountain. And at this, the bull got stuck in a bog hole and was finally killed. As you can expect, quite the audience grew watching this Sleegallen giant beat the giant black bull from Armagh all the way over to Tullybrick. But exhausted at the end of this, and possessed with this new power, Tadhg started to eat the bull. Now you can only imagine what the onlookers began to think. Here was this giant man eating the bull right in front of him. He didn't cook it. He just ate it like a bear mauling his prey. And at this, the crowd started to pray to St. Patrick. They prayed that he would take away the blessing. St. Patrick answered their prayers and took back his blessing. And losing all the new strength that he had, because his stomach was so full of the meat of the bull, it exploded and Tadhg died. He is said to be resting now in a wedge tomb in the middle of the peatland in Tullybrick, and not too far away from his ancestor Columba, whose resting place is over in Ballybreast. But there's one thing that's said down through the ages. After this, the giants remembered how they were treated. And it said that after this, that they'd never do battle again, unless they were defending their own. I think that's a good place to leave it tonight. Tomorrow night I'll be coming live from Fried's Bar and Restaurant in Swatra. And although there is another saint mentioned in this story, it's not the saint that goes to battle. And tomorrow night, I'm going to be telling you the true story of Dracula. Who he really was, how he really lived, killed, and how he is trapped under a great stone in the Sperrins Mountains to this very day. That'll be one to make you think. These stories are part of my crowdfunding project. You can find the link in the comments, up, down, left, right, wherever it's at. And if you find these stories entertaining, just to make a donation. So until tomorrow, buckle yourself up, because this story's a good one. Good night. Our ancestors warned us. We didn't listen. We thought if we changed the name, people would forget. A king like wraith 'neath ancient mountain lays,
Adorned in the Sperrins' loving arms he remains. Bladed grass and piercing thorns shield his craggy tomb. He prays beguiled under dark starry skies, waiting